Coming in at number 10 is Selene. Selene is a mutant, and what is known as an external. Externals are essentially a group of immortals that include characters like Apocalypse and Gideon, who can resurrect themselves and all share a psychic link, which is the main thing that separates them from other immortals. Selene is also a magician and was born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Essentially, she's like an energy vampire. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She's demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and a knack for being pretty sinister, but not really being too well known to casual fans. Number 9. Barbados. Barbados is one of the big bads from the death metal event, but because we had the Batman Who Laughs, I think Barbados kind of fell by the wayside for a few people, and I'll admit, I was one of them. But Barbados is nothing to scoff at. In the earliest days of existence, two siblings came into reality, tasked with monitoring creation. Along with them came a third being known as the Forger, who was set to watch over creations that would exist in the future. The Forger made its home in the Forge of Worlds inside what would later be named the Dark Multiverse. The Forger created universes based on the hopes and fears of every living thing. And while the stable universes became part of the multiverse, the Forger would dispatch its dragon to destroy the unstable worlds so that their energy could be returned to the Forge and recycled. That dragon is Barbados. Barbados had a lust for destruction, which eventually led him to take out the Forger and corrupt the World Forge. The unstable worlds persisted beyond their time and became part of the Dark Multiverse field with horrifying realities. He then changed his goals, setting his warpath onto the regular multiverse. Now fast forward multiple centuries, and Barbados' followers started to secretly prepare Batman to become the doorway for Barbados to enter the Prime Earth from the Dark Multiverse, causing a big old mess in the DC Multiverse. Number 8. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, while on the cusp of the afterlife and in incredible pain due to his hunger, this mutant's powers finally activated. He gained superhuman strength and durability alongside an extremely bestial form similar to a minotaur, but almost as if made of stone, like a minotaur statue, but cooler. While he is incredibly strong and durable, his even more powerful mutant ability is called Empathic War Infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he went boom. Decimus became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. And in at number 7 is Conquest. Viltrumites, who are featured in Image Comics' Invincible series, are incredibly hardy folk. They have levels of strength and durability akin to Superman without having to be solar charged and without being allergic to big green rocks. They also grow stronger and stronger with both age and experience. One of their oldest, most honored warriors is a Viltrumite by the name of Conquest. Viltrumites live for a very long time. Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, is a fully adult Viltrumite, and he has lived for thousands and thousands of years, and he has only a small show of white hair to show for it. Of all the Viltrumites seen in the comics, a rare few have fully white hair. Conquest not only has that, but he has lost a lot of his hair, is super wrinkly, and he's also battle scarred and missing an arm. Back in the day, the Viltrumites were exposed to a virus that nearly wiped them out, called the Scourge virus. Conquest was one of the few that survived, but he was left weakened after it left his system, which happened to coincide with his arrival on a planet filled with Ragnar, which are the only species in the universe that can actually kill Viltrumites. So that's where the missing arm and scarring comes from. Conquest is one of the strongest Viltrumites around, and even when his face is turned into tomato soup by Invincible, he still regenerates and comes back for round 2. Number 6. Malebolgia. And we are sticking with Image Comics for this point, but moving away from Invincible, we are going to talk about Spawn. Now, yes, I am a little lacking in the knowledge department when it comes to Spawn comics, but I do know that the whole reason Al Simmons became a Hellspawn in the first place is because of this guy, the ruler of the 8th sphere of Hell, Amalgam. Over 70,000 years ago, this being was created by a past ruler of Hell out of necroplasm rivers, but he was so powerful that he betrayed, overpowered, and took the life of his creator. In order to wage war on heaven and destroy God, he created an army of Hellspawn, but he needed a general, which he couldn't find until he found Al Simmons. He made a deal with a man named Jason Wynn to take Al's life, which is when Amalgam made a deal for Al to become his general in exchange for being able to see his wife. But in the end, it didn't really work out too well for this ruler of Hell, did it? Nope.
Number 5. Lady Phoenix. While I did think that Phoenix was a little too on the nose for my part 1 of this list, there were some who actually requested her in the comments, so fair enough. Some people want to know more about her. And since she was featured in our thumbnail / cover photo for that first part of our list, I felt for all you loyal nerds who came to this part 2, I should oblige you and tell you more about Lady Phoenix. Who is the woman we featured on that thumb? She is also a member of the 1 million BCE Avengers, also nicknamed the Stone Age or Prehistoric Avengers. Before she was the host of the Phoenix, she was simply known as Firehair, named after her bright red hair, which left her abandoned by her parents only shortly after she was born into the world. Anyone who their tribe deemed basically different in some way was sacrificed in this manner. This was also to be the fate of Firehair, but she was rescued by wolves, so she ended up being okay. She grew up among her pack, but eventually joined up with the Tribe Without Fear, a group of prehistoric mutants. Her own mutant powers would manifest, and she would eventually lose her tribe and become bonded to the Phoenix Force. Ultimately resisting its dark temptations, she would go on to become one of the founding members of the Stone Age Avengers alongside Odin. While it was suggested that Lady Phoenix was actually the true mother of Thor, we learned in Avengers 1 million BC issue number 1 from 2022 that her relationship ended with Odin before Thor was born, with Gaia being Thor's natural mother as we knew before, Freya being Thor's adoptive mother, and Lady Phoenix being dubbed kinda like his bonus mother, after she helped Gaia give birth to Thor and saved him from a premature death. And then Gaia was like, you can be mother to Thor too. So we got that all figured out. Sorry what I said on part 1 is not exactly true. Not his mother, well she is his mother, but she's not his only mother. He's got a lot of mothers. Number 4. Artemis. Artemis was also once Wonder Woman, don't you know? Back in the New Earth continuity. She herself is an Amazon, and despite her youthful appearance, like most Amazons, she's pretty old. In fact, in the New Earth continuity, she was also granted eternal youth as the result of a spell that Circe had cast upon her. In the Prime Earth continuity, she is just straight up immortal. She hails from the Bana Migdal, which is a splinter group of Amazons all their own. Like I said, there are many different tribes. Princess Diana of Themyscira and Artemis have often been presented as rivals in the comics, with Artemis often being jealous of Wonder Woman and kind of striving to prove herself superior to Diana. But despite this, she is ultimately a force for good and a hero, though her warrior's heart might be a little harder in comparison maybe to Diana's when it comes to her heroic approach. Number 3. Red Sonja. Red Sonja is an interesting one to think of as old, considering how she is often portrayed in the comics, but like Conan, who I touched on during the part 1 of this list, Sonja herself is also ancient in the sense that she hails from the past, the Hyborian Age. She was a creation of Robert E. Howard's, who initially existed within Marvel, but eventually ended up being moved over to Dynamite when it comes to who owns the right to this fiery, fierce warrior character. The Hyborian Age was actually a pastime in Marvel history, at least that is what we're led to believe based on the fact that both she and Conan hail from the reality of Earth 616. Red Sonja set out on her path to become a fierce fighter at a young age, after she was left orphaned when her family were killed and her people were attacked by a group of mercenaries. Red Sonja hails from Western Hyrcania and often fights to help those who cannot help themselves, even sometimes training those she comes across so that they might actually act as a hero in their own story. She is sometimes also a sword for hire, but generally only takes jobs that kind of fit with her own particular moral code. And she does have a moral code, even though she's a mercenary a lot of the times. Number 2. Shazam. Wait. Billy Batson is super old? no, we aren't talking about Shazam. Not that Shazam. Not the Shazam formerly known as Captain Marvel. We're talking about the Wizard, who gave Billy Batson his powers and who has also been known by the name of Shazam. Initially in the Prime Earth continuity, we were led to believe that the Wizard was simply someone who bestowed powers on Billy, but we'd later learned that he was actually one of the old gods Shazam would actually get his powers from. This truth of the Wizard's, aka Mama Roggins, aka Shazam's origin would be revealed after Billy Batson was left depowered following the action of Grail, Darkseid's daughter, who basically cut off his access to his powers by untethering the old gods from his magic lightning. While not a direct superhero, the Wizard is a powerful force of good who was even able to help repower Billy from the afterworld in spirit form, finding basically new gods for him to be empowered by. Number 1. Eternal Warrior. Marvel and DC are not the only publishers who have ancient heroes. Even Dynamite, now owning Red Sonja, is not the only publisher with ancient superheroes by any stretch. A lot of people have ancient superheroes. In fact, one publisher that was suggested in the comments that has tons of ancient superheroes is Valiant Comics, so I'm happy to be talking to you about that. Great suggestion. This particular hero from Valiant that we're talking about is Gilad Anipada. Gilad was one of 4 siblings granted immortality. He has used this extended time over his life to train up, becoming a master in many different areas of combat. He acts as a hero in the comics, being tasked with defending the Geomancer of any given generation. Geomancers were kind of born in a line, and they're magical heroes in their own right who were chosen to act on behalf of the Earth as the planet's defender, and who are able to communicate with nature and the Earth. And the Eternal Warrior basically just acts as like their guardian, so heroes protecting heroes. Number 10. Legends of the Dead Earth. In Legends of the Dead Earth, the surviving human population of Earth are all basically aboard a spaceship, which drifts kinda aimlessly through space as it's lost its heading. The humans have also been on the spaceship so long, they basically forgot there's even a world outside. However, Batman rises up among them to become a hero and help them once again find their way. This Batman is not the Batman, Bruce Wayne, but instead a well-meaning citizen on the spaceship who learns the truth about how they are basically lost. He takes up the mantle of the hero from old folklore, known as Batman, and inspires a girl aboard the ship named Tris Plover to help him in his fight to fix the ship's navigation system. It's actually a really depressing story though, because in the end she's like, man, I'm not gonna be alive to get to this planet. What's the point of anything? Number 9. Saint Batman. Saint Batman was the name Azrael took up in one of the Dark Multiverse alternate realities. Here, Azrael had taken up the cape and cowl in Batman's stead after his back was broken by Bane, but refused to give back the mantle, and instead of Batman defeating Jean-Paul and taking the mantle back, Azrael basically won that fight, keeping it. He turned Bruce into a shadow of his former self, removing all his limbs and keeping him alive through kind of a cybernetic life support thing, which also seemed to cause Bruce extreme pain. Years later, Bruce is saved by the son of Talia al Ghul and Bane. However, it turns out in rescuing Batman and later defeating Azrael, they really just swapped out one awful tyrant for an even worse one. And friends, before we head on to the next point, if you are loving this list, we would love if you headed over to our Facebook page and gave it a like and a follow. It really does help us out over here at YouTube, so thank you! Number 6. Jace Fox. Jace becomes Batman in the possible future we get a glimpse into through DC's Future State event. In this event, Jace Fox, also known as Tim Fox, one of the children of Batman's ally Lucius Fox, ends up becoming Batman in a cyberpunk dystopian future where Gotham has become a police state. Jace is a mysterious figure but stumbles upon Batman's tech and decides to try and use it to do some good, despite the fact that at this point all masks are outlawed in Gotham. Jace Fox keeps his vigilante deeds and persona a secret from the rest of the Fox family. Many of his combat skills come from his life as a mercenary and from Katana, who he was once a protege of. Number 7. Justice League of Assassins. In the alternate future reality of Earth 14, the JLA is a little bit different. Instead of being the Justice League of America, they are known as the Justice League of Assassins, which still perfectly fits that same acronym, so yay. JLA. Like in the main reality, Batman also ends up joining this team. The world they live in seems to be a post-apocalyptic war zone when we see the JLA in issue number 15 of the 2016 Superman series. Despite their most valiant efforts, the Justice League of Assassins, including Batman, end up defeated and killed by the Prophecy. Batman actually ends up losing his head as a result of this fight. He's like the first one to go. Gets his head shot clean off. At least he still gets to finish what he was saying though. as his head pops off. Number 6. Helena Wayne. In the alternate future reality of Earth 2, it is Helena Wayne, Batman and Catwoman's daughter, who lives on to carry on the Batman legacy. Helena Wayne is often known by the name Huntress, not to be confused with Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress of the main continuity, but eventually goes on to take up her father's mantle of Batman. Yeah, not Batwoman, just Batman. Kinda love it. We haven't gotten to see too much of Helena's Batman in action, but I have always loved the idea of Catwoman and Batman settling down together and having a daughter who would one day be inspired to carry on their legacy and become a hero using either of their superhero names in their honor.
Halfway through and in number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Like, maybe I'll be able to like grab a piece of like acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because like you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is after all the same old Captain America, so pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I'll make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal. In at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Doctor Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control, which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so. In at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kinda have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying, because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country, and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. That just seems like that's insane to me. Penultimately, and at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled, because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan Manhattan on this list, when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian. The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world, but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
Number 10, Mistress Death. To call this character evil is a bit of a miscommunication. She is just a law of the universe, a force of nature, a cosmic being carrying out her duty. But to many people, she is an evil entity because, I mean, losing a loved one is one of the most emotionally painful things we can go through. No matter if you see her as evil or just doing her job, she has been around since the creation of the universe, so there is no doubt that she is ancient. So I'm keeping her here at the top of the list because she isn't entirely evil and has comforted and even saved a few people on a few occasions, but still brings the end of the line. She keeps balance in the universe, taking away life while other cosmic entities give it. Also, she's a big part of the reason Thanos has done all the horrible things he's done in Marvel Comics, so there's that as well to make her seem a bit more evil.
Coming up on the 9th spot is Null. That's with a K. And this fella is bad news. He's an eldritch entity, the god of darkness, ruler of the void, and oh yeah, homeboy created the symbiotes. Any evil that's come from the many symbiotes can all be traced back to Null, who rules over the hive mind. When you stop and consider just how much suffering the symbiotes have been responsible for, how much damage and destruction, and all of that can be pointed back to Null, you gotta figure that is a pretty powerful ancient evil. Decked out with some sweet symbiote armor and an impressive sword, Null has his sights set on galactic conquest with the symbiote army. And honestly, he was making a pretty good play for the throne were he not stopped by Eddie Brock in a truly staggering duel of cosmic proportions. Sure, yeah, you might have birthed the symbiote race, but it's hard for anyone to top the guy who made symbiotes cool in the first place. You can't beat Venom. I mean, he's got his own theme song by Eminem. How many of us can say the same?
Number 8, Selene. While a lot of beings on this list are cosmic and godlike in their nature, Selene is a mutant external and a magician born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Yikes. Essentially, she is a vampire, just without any of the blood draining stuff. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. But that's not her only powers. As an external, she also possesses immortality, allowing her to even resurrect herself. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She has demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the knack for being just pretty sinister.
Number 7, Shumagorath. Now maybe you remember Shumagorath from a star-studded appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Except psych! Due to a licensing issue, that was actually Gargantos. But it was supposed to be Shumagorath, so you were right to think that. Marvel's resident Lovecraftian god, who's lived for millions of years beyond the stars. Even older than the Marvel Universe itself. Quite literally, if you want to get a bit metatextual with it, since Shumagorath began life as a villain for the Conan mythos, tying itself into the greater Cthulhu mythos with H.P. Lovecraft, who was a pretty good friend of Robert E. Howard back in the day. It's a pretty interesting backstory and makes sense since Shumagorath is an all-powerful multi-dimensional entity. It only makes sense that it exists across the multiverse in ours as well. Shumagorath is about as powerful as a Lovecraftian god can get, boasting all the usual feats, incredible strength, difficult to put down, all kinds of psychokinetic abilities that leads him into all sorts of clashes with everybody's favorite sorcerer, Doctor Strange.
Number 6, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose a bigger version of him? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Fimbulwinter, for the Norse mythology people out there, was the one who brought the end of the 6th iteration of the universe, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, and that's the guy who becomes Galactus. When the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possesses the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, and it's awesome, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. Luckily though, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe, he is just just here for his herald, Galactus. Luckily, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter. It's all just super awesome. Definitely check it out.
Number 5. Conan the Barbarian. That's right, Conan is an ancient superhero who actually also hails from Marvel. Not only that, but he was also an Avenger. Despite technically being a Marvel superhero, Conan is also kind of otherworldly, hailing from the sword and fantasy genre of comics. Although for Marvel, Conan is still labeled as an Earth 616 character, hailing from their main comic book reality. He does, however, come from the Hyborian Age, an old hero from the past. But he was one of the heroes still summoned by Doctor Strange and Elektra when they brought together their own team of Savage Avengers to stand against the threat of Kulan Gath. This went down in Jerry Dugan and Adam Gorham's Savage Avengers series, which I still really want to read. It looks super good. It just looks like such a great time. And Conan's presence on the team is definitely part of the reason for my motivation to jump into this series, hopefully in the near future. I have a lot of things to read.
And at 4, Mr. Majestic. I put this here because I like the word majestic, but also this is kind of weird. Mr. Majestic is a Wildstorm comic superhero created by H.K. Prager and Jim Lee. He made his first appearance in Wildcats number 11 as a backup story, but he's known for being the strongest superhero in the Wildstorm universe, and he shares quite a few similarities with Superman. But given that Wildstorm is owned by DC, there shouldn't really be any conflict there. Mr. Majestic is originally from the planet Kara and was known as Magistros, but yeah, this isn't like Superman at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying that? He has 2 kids, Kanesha and Magistrate, but there was also an infertility crisis in his homeworld, which resulted in only 1 child per woman. Yeah, so how did this happen? Well, Magistros and Coda warrior Lady Xana, who was also later known as other things, it doesn't matter. They were chosen not to breed, but since Coda warriors became priestesses after giving birth, Xana's mother pretended that Kanesha was stillborn and then claimed to have given birth to her herself. Yeah, so basically Kanesha passed off her daughter as her sister, which is a whole... They're old. It's old. It's an old thing. I don't...
Number 3. Starbrand. Vin is the Starbrand in 1 million BCE. He ends up becoming the Starbrand after leaving his tribe. He left them because he believed he did not belong due to the fact that he realized he was gay. Something that seemed to be unacceptable to his people in that time. On his journey, he sought out a garden he had seen in a dream, which it turned out appeared to be the biblical paradise known as the Garden of Eden. Once he found it, he also found Burke. Also no vowels. No vowels for these people in prehistoric times. The 2 men became lovers, but would eventually be separated after Burke died in a deviant attack. It seemed the deviants wanted the garden for themselves. The attack resulted in a cave-in, and while Burke did not survive, Vin did, finding the body of a dinosaur who had previously been the Starbrand. Vin was imbued with its powers and fought against those who had killed Burke. However, in the process, this also destroyed the garden. Vin would go on to become the hero known as Starbrand in his time and join up with the other Stone Age Avengers of 1 million BCE.
But ultimately, in number 2, Doctor Strange Fate. Doctor Strange Fate is the amalgam of Doctor Strange, Charles Xavier, and Dr. Fate. Yeah, they're present in the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602, and given that both the Sorcerer Supreme and Dr. Fate are present, I think that this qualifies as ancient. Dr. Fate alone just makes that happen. Strange Fate learned that 2 keys controlled by Access would restore the DC Comics and Marvel Comics universes to their own worlds, which would result in the destruction of the Amalgam universe and therefore him. So, to keep his universe intact, Dr. Strange Fate recruits Jade Nova, Skulk, and White Witch to capture Access and bring him to Strange Fate so that the Amalgam universe can remain active. But it turns out that he was actually a part of a problem, or a part of the problem. That's a story for another day. But Doctor Strange, yes, the real one, preserved the Amalgam universe in a pocket dimension, essentially making it its own multiverse in a sense. But I also bring this up because I like the Amalgam universe, okay? It's cool. Iron Lantern, Lobo the Duck, hell yeah.
Number 1. Man-Thing Sorcerer Supreme. Perhaps even more surprising is a reality where the Man-Things rule the planet. Their version of the 1 million BCE Avengers team is filled exclusively with Man-Things as a result. One of these Man-Things is known as the Sorcerer Supreme on this planet in the reality we know as Earth 91. Unfortunately, we do not get to know too much about this version of Man-Thing, as he is killed by the Masters of Evil when they come to his reality in Avengers Forever issue number 5 from 2022. What we do know is that, like Dr. Stephen Strange and many other Sorcerer Supremes, this Man-Thing does seem to possess a cape, although it is a bit shorter than Strange's, I would say. His version of the Eye of Agamotto, or his version of the third eye, I'm not really sure what's going on with this, also seems to be something that he has, but he wears inside his chest, or on his chest. I think Doctor Strange ends up with a third eye at one point, but he's also got the Eye of Agamotto, so I don't know. Instead of Man-Thing wearing this anywhere else, or having it on a chain or a necklace, implying, that this eye is a part of him. Or perhaps it's simply, like I said, just a third eye, and it's just on the chest. I feel like that wouldn't be, I guess he doesn't really wear clothes because he's a Man-Thing, so actually I guess it'd be fine.
Number 10, Hulk 2099. This is the only Hulk on this list that is not a Bruce Banner. No, this version of the Hulk is a guy named John Eisenhart. He was a corporate lawyer for big movie studios who went to manipulate a group called the Knights of Banner, who were a cult-like group of warriors who followed the ideologies of Bruce Banner. John was going to gain the rights for their name in order to make a movie about them, all while giving them nothing in return. He turns them into this corporation called Sweet Dreams, thinking they'll be brought in peacefully, but it doesn't go that way. The only Knight of Banner who survives, a kid, goes to a gamma machine, but John saves the kid, pushing him out of the way and being blasted with gamma radiation. John can turn into the Hulk whenever he wants. He has a super strong prehensile tongue, and he is much more beast-like with massive claws. He is just as powerful as the regular Hulk, but unfortunately, his comics were not popular enough to last more than 12 issues. Maybe he'll get a resurgence, I don't know. And at number 9, it's Age of Apocalypse Hulk, a world where the megalomaniacal apocalypse rose to power and mutants rule mercilessly while humans are treated like cattle. This version of Bruce Banner originally betrayed mankind, but after his experiments turned him into the Hulk, he fought for humans once again. This version of the Hulk starts off as the Grey Hulk, but is referred to as Thing until he saves Tony Stark, Gwen Stacy, and Victor Von Doom from a gamma nuke that he created that inadvertently goes off, forcing his transformation from Grey to Green Hulk. Now this guy is pretty much an equal to his normal 616 self, but once Weapon X becomes the ruler of this Earth, this Hulk is able to go toe to toe with him, shrugging off attacks and giving a hell of a fight for the crazy powerful mutant. And at number 8, Zombie Hulk. Marvel's Zombies isn't really a future story. Like, it sort of becomes one, but it isn't when it starts. Time is relative, so look. Basically, in the story, eventually the zombie Galacti, as in those zombified heroes who consumed the Silver Surfer and Galactus and gained the power cosmic, travel out into the universe and begin consuming worlds and galaxies. So much so that they consume everything until nothing is left. As you can imagine, that's the kind of thing that may take a while. Long enough to be considered the future? I shall allow you to debate below. This Hulk was a lead consumer in the team of cosmically powered zombie superheroes and villains. So much so that when they ran out of people to consume, Zombie Thanos blamed Hulk for eating more than his fair share, to which Zombie Hulk decided he had enough of Thanos and put him out of commission. Number 7, Lizard Hulk. In the alternate future of the Spider Island story, the whole of New York City has been taken over by a villain known as the Spider Queen. The Spider Queen has infected almost all inhabitants of the city, including all of the heroes, with a virus that turns them into mindless spider zombie-like slaves under her control. Luckily, there's a group of heroes who make a resistance to this villainous Spider Queen. Most notable among them would be Eugene Flash Thompson, or Agent Venom. Agent Venom eventually realizes that if he subjects some of these spider hybrid heroes to a different DNA tampering process, like for example the Lizard Serum or even the Green Goblin Serum, that it will override the spider transformation, effectively curing the patients. When a group of spider heroes, including the Spider Hulk, attack Agent Venom, he injects the Spider Hulk with the Lizard Serum, effectively turning him into a more giant and muscular Lizard Hulk. He got a tail, he got sharp teeth, he got scales, he a Lizard Hulk, baby! Number 6, Intelligent Design God Hulk from What If Planet Hulk. Most comic book readers, and especially fans of Marvel and the Hulk, know of the storyline where the Illuminati banished the Hulk from Earth to send him to another planet. He ended up crash landing on Sakaar and becoming a gladiator turned liberator turned ruler of the planet until his ship self-destructed, killing his family and bringing him back to Earth with a vengeance that no guilty person was safe from. What if Planet Hulk ends up asking the question, what if the Illuminati's banishment had hit its original target? In this story, Hulk lands on an incredibly peaceful and serene planet. And sure, he goes a bit ragey at first, but he eventually realizes the planet is inhabited by a race of peaceful creatures. Over long periods of time, the Hulk helps this race to evolve and become a thriving civilization. They end up viewing the Hulk as their god, and he basically acts as one that leads them to wealth and prosperity. It's one of the few Hulk stories that doesn't end in tears, and I'm more than happy to talk about it for that reason alone.
Number 5. Old Head Deadpool. This alternate version of Deadpool comes from the Wastelanders or Old Man Logan reality of Earth 807-128. Here, Deadpool appears to have survived the uprising of supervillains, destruction of the Earth, and post-apocalyptic setting of this continuity. At least, his head did. We see him as a head in a jar in Wastelander's Hawkeye, where he is kept in a bar that Juggernaut frequents, and is potentially the boss of? Although he no longer has a body, this merc still has kept his mouth, and still uses it to crack wise at almost any opportunity that presents itself. Number 4. Deadpool 2099. Deadpool 2099 is Warda Wilson, the daughter of Shiklah and Deadpool. While in 2099, Deadpool also exists, although it is actually Warda who holds her father hostage, along with Emily Preston, the adoptive mother of Eleanor Preston, who is also Deadpool's daughter. Warda kidnaps them both in hopes of finding out what happened to her mother, Shiklah, who basically went missing. While she is the daughter of Deadpool, Wade never really knew about her until then because Shiklah and Deadpool split up before she was born, and Shiklah basically decided to keep Warda's existence a secret from Wade. Like her dad, this future legacy version of Deadpool, Warda Wilson, also has a healing factor. Number 3. Legacy Deadpool. Deadpool has more than one daughter actually. He also has Ellie Camacho, also known in this future as Eleanor Preston. She is the adopted daughter of Deadpool and Emily Preston in the future of Earth 16356, the same reality that Warda is also existing in. Here Ellie ends up manifesting immortality powers, with her basically regenerating upon her death, being reborn with all of her prior memories, but basically reset to look as she did when her powers first manifested. In other words, she becomes a teenager physically again, and then grows from there whenever she dies. Ellie has always been one of my favorites when it comes to heroes kids out there, and although I loved Shiklah and Deadpool together, I have always preferred Ellie to their daughter, Warda. Ellie takes up her father's mantle and is known by the codename Deadpool in this reality. Deadpool Ellie goes on to fight against her half-sister, Deadpool Warda, in the future, who is also of course known as Deadpool 2099, one of them. Number 2. Future X-Men. During Battle of the Atom, a future Deadpool appears as part of the Future X-Men team. He is there in an attempt to send the all-new X-Men, or past X-Men, back to their time, convincing them to return, where they belong. This alternate version of Wade also seems to be a fan of Gold Balls. He claims in the future that Gold Ball's apparently a legend and asks for his autograph, though I don't know if he's joking. In reality, the X-Men team that he is a part of is not really a future X-Men team, but is instead a future Brotherhood of Evil Mutants team, ha ha ha, led by the evil son of Professor X and Mystique, Charles Xavier II, and the evil son of Wolverine and Mystique, Reyes. Number 1. Days of Future Past. Deadpool managed to retcon an old future version of himself into Days of Future Past, and appears in Cosmic Ghost Rider's story where he himself is doing some meddling in the future timeline, which for him is currently the past. Does that make sense? Or have I lost you yet? I feel like time travel, we lose everyone at some point. Still, Cosmic Ghost Rider decides to call it the future to simplify, so I think it's fair that we do so too. Here, Deadpool appears to have somehow become the leader of the X-Men. His original plan was to send Kitty Pryde back in time, but when Cosmic Ghost Rider steals the valuable jammer component she was meant to transport to help prevent the bleak dystopian future, Deadpool decides to send Cosmic Ghost Rider back in time instead. This all goes down in the series Cosmic Ghost Rider destroys Marvel history in issue number 3. What is your favorite future alternate version of Deadpool? Do you like when Deadpool gets all timey-wimey with his alternates, or do you just prefer when they are just from alternate worlds and have just distinct differences, like Lady Deadpool or Evil Deadpool or Panda Deadpool? Pandapool? Number 10. Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage is definitely one of the most ancient villains out there. It's actually kinda like his whole thing. Savage originally existed all the way back in the prehistoric ages, having initially been a caveman. He got his powers from a radioactive meteorite which granted him immortality and enhanced intelligence. Even way back then, he was fighting heroes like Batman, if you can believe it. This was after Batman was sent on some time adventures after facing off against Darkseid. While he was suspected as being dead, in reality Darkseid's Omega Sanction had simply banished Batman to wander through time, which actually kinda sounds nice to me, except that part of this punishment was that his lives that he would experience were all supposed to be, well, pretty awful. Still though, when facing off against Vandal Savage, even with Vandal's somewhat newfound powers, Batman won. I mean, you can be ancient and immortal, but that doesn't mean that you're immune from being beaten by Batman, right? Batman's got that plot armor, baby. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here on Top 10 Nerd and you love when I talk about supervillains, I know I do, be sure to check out our supervillains playlist over on the channel for even more good villainous content. Number 9, Surtur. Surtur is not someone we think of too often or even touch on, but he's a pretty big deal in the comics and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, in the MCU, he successfully managed to destroy Asgard, fulfilling his prophesized role in Ragnarok. And what's more, Thor knew that this was what needed to be done in order to stop his sister Hela. So despite facing off against Surtur initially, he ended up having to be the one to free him so that the prophecy could actually be realized, sacrificing the place of Asgard in order to save the people of Asgard. In the comics, Surtur is an ancient foe, having been the sworn enemy of Odin for, well, pretty much forever. He hails from Muspelheim, and even for years successfully stopped Odin from achieving an alliance between the people of Odin's own Asgardian tribe, the Aesir, and the other Asgardian tribe known as the Vanir. Number 8, Circe. Circe is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite ancient villains around, possibly one of my favorite DC villains of all time around. Being that she is also the Circe from ancient Greek myth, I think you can understand just how old she is. Circe is known for being a powerful witch and in the Prime Earth continuity was also revealed to be one of Hecate's witch marked. Her insane magical ability is how she has been able to survive for so long, without also appearing to have aged much at all. However, I will also add that in the New Earth continuity, this is also thanks to the fact that Circe is actually descended from Titans, which not only makes her immortal and ageless, but also pretty durable as well. Circe is known for being a powerful Wonder Woman foe, but despite the fact that Wonder Woman is really well known among comic fans, I feel like her villains get less time in the spotlight for, I don't know, for some reason, despite the fact that Wonder Woman actually has a pretty stacked rogues gallery all her own. And like Circe, many of them also seem to have a rich and interesting history. Seriously, I feel like Circe could just like have her own comic series. That's how much she has and has had going on throughout her life and throughout the comics. Number 7, Morgan Le Fay. Speaking of powerful witches, Morgan Le Fay is a villain we really don't get to showcase or focus on a lot on this channel, so I am taking this opportunity to remind you of just how ancient and how bad she is. Morgan Le Fay is a villain who hails originally from Arthurian legend and was adopted as a character in Marvel Comics all the way back in 1955, making her first appearance in Black Knight issue number 1. But of course, she's actually much older than 1955 in terms of her canon character history. Morgan Le Fay existed just after the ancient and mythical times of the island of Atlantis. In this version of the story, not all of the island was lost, and actually some islands that were part of Atlantis still existed, chiefly Avalon, which is where Morgan was born. Unfortunately, the remaining isles of Atlantis would eventually also be drowned and swallowed up by the sea, causing Morgan, her mother, and the man who would become known as Merlin to flee to Britain. This all happened before the 6th century, with Morgan eventually temporarily becoming Merlin's apprentice. As a villain, Morgan has not only tormented the people of her own time period, but she has also traveled to the present day and threatened the people and heroes of that time as well. Number 6, Barbatos. Barbatos is the Bat God who basically helped Batman to become what he is today, but as part of his own dark machinations. At least, you know, Barbatos claims to be that. According to Barbatos, he was the bat that appeared before Bruce the night that he decided to become Batman, inspiring the young Bruce Wayne to go on to don the cape and cowl, and becoming a major symbol for Batman. Barbatos was once the loyal ally of the World Forger. He was a dragon who would destroy worlds that were unstable, often built on fear, known as belonging to the Forge of Worlds. Barbatos, however, grew to enjoy destroying worlds so much that he actually decided to rebel against the the World Forger so he could destroy more worlds, ultimately destroying his master, which allowed him to corrupt his Forge of Worlds, with it warping and ultimately becoming known by a name you might be more familiar with, the Dark Multiverse. Just as the World Forger is one of the oldest beings in the cosmos over at DC, so is his pet dragon gone rogue, Barbatos. Barbatos would go on to recruit others to his new purpose to destroy the main multiverse. Number 5. The Old Guard. Can we call the Old Guard heroes? I'm not really 100% sure on that. They're ancient warriors who've been many things over the years. Not all the things they've done were necessarily good, but I would say for the most part, they've tried to stay on the side of good, so I think I'm gonna count them for this list. And that's definitely where they are at when it comes to where we meet them in the modern day. Or at least, the direction they're headed towards, I would say. Initially, the Old Guard were a group of immortal mercenaries led by their oldest member, Andy, aka Andromaca of Scythia, who is thousands of years old. It is in their welcoming of a new member that we get to see some of the good in them, despite them being essentially expensive, deadly, and nearly indestructible guns for hire. Their immortality is as much a mystery to them as it is to readers of the series, seemingly happening to each member miraculously and really without explanation. One minute they were alive, the next dead, and then inexplicably right back to living. In 2020, the Old Guard comics got their first film adaptation through Netflix. As with most Greg Rucka creations, the premise and his approach had me hooked, pretty much.
Number 4. Medieval Spawn. Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say this, I know nothing about Spawn. I did not watch the show, I never read the comics, I really have no right to be standing here in front of you talking about him, but I'm doing it anyways. Don't worry, I'm not actually talking about the Spawn. I'm going to be talking about Medieval Spawn. Naturally, Medieval Spawn was not only a hell spawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. And if you think about it, knights were almost like medieval superheroes, with tales and stories all their own. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 others mistook the king's anger for orders and went and took the life of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, once he passed at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Malbolgia and returned as a hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing anyone who chooses to don his helmet. And I need to start reading Spawn. Right now.
Number 3. Witchblade. While most people think of Sarah Pizzini when they think of the Witchblade, Sarah was not the only one to wield the blade, and was, in fact, by far the first. One of the oldest Witchblade wielders was actually Samantha. Samantha hails from ancient Roman times, though she herself is not Roman, but instead was a native of an old Celtic town that they overtook named Cecilia. At least I think its name was Cecilia. There's also a character in the story with her that's named Cecilia, so that's a little confusing, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Samantha was enslaved, but would eventually escape and end up running into druids out in the countryside, who believed she was the one who would be destined to save the other Celts from the Romans. She was given the Witchblade and would set out on a mission to destroy all Romans. While a hero ultimately, I would say, at least of her own story, Samantha's tale and alignment is pretty complex, which is often what makes Witchblade hosts like her so interesting.
Number 2. Martian Manhunter. I didn't actually know how old Martian Manhunter is. I knew that he was the last of his race of Martians, and I know that he is extremely powerful and should never be slept on. And I know that he speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who has seen some serious shiznit. But when I found out that according to DC, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old, I gotta say, I took a moment to just digest that. John Johns, or John Jones if you want to be rude and go by his human name, arrived on Earth after he was pulled there by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who brought him through space and time and then passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian. This is because John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now on Earth, with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shapeshifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful members. Just saying.
Number 1. 1. Ghost Rider. Way before Johnny Blaze was even ever born, there was Ghost. Ghost is the original Ghost Rider, or at least believed to be the original Ghost Rider, the initial spirit of vengeance. Retroactively anyways, as he made his first comic book appearance after Johnny Blaze historically, appearing in Marvel Legacy issue number 1 from 2017. So obviously that's pretty recent, but you know, canonically one of the first. Ghost became the first Ghost Rider during the prehistoric era and did so in order to defeat the mysterious Wendigo, who took over his pack, becoming their leader only to eat the pack members save for Ghost. Ghost would stumble upon a snake and speak its real name in order to become Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. He also has a cool mammoth, or he had a cool mammoth, and then he got another mammoth, and I think that mammoth's gone too, but he likes mammoths. He would go on to join up with the Avengers of 1 million BC. Number 10. What If Sorcerer Supreme? In the What If series, we got an issue that explored the idea of what would happen if Tony Stark became Sorcerer Supreme in place of Stephen Strange, and was forced to do battle with the Dread Lord of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu. Oddly enough, this isn't the only alternate future where Tony ends up as Sorcerer Supreme. Maybe we'll talk about that later. It's actually just one of them. Here, both Stark and Strange are in a car accident together, which robs Stephen of his ability to use his hands as a surgeon. Tony swears to fix Stephen's hands, and the two set out on a quest, which sets Stark down a path to meeting and training with the Ancient One, instead of Stephen doing that. After becoming the Ancient One's disciple and defeating the evil Baron Mordo, Stark becomes the new Sorcerer Supreme and is forced to do battle with Dormammu, who plans on, of course, invading Earth. Stark makes for himself a suit of armor to help him defeat Dormammu, which combines both Tony's knowledge of technology and the mystic arts. Number 9. Iron Man 2020. Iron Man 2020 is both an event and a character. The editorial name was given to a different Iron Man, Arno Stark. Arno Stark, aka Iron Man 2020, was Tony's secret brother and the natural-born heir of the Stark family. Whereas it was later revealed that Tony was actually adopted to kind of help cover up what had really happened with Arno and to basically protect the firstborn Stark. Arno would end up taking up the mantle of Iron Man in the future year of 2020. Although now that would actually be the past, because it's 2022 at the time of this recording, and at the time of the event it was the present because it was 2020. The original Iron Man 2020 comic was actually published in the 90s, so at the time 2020 was very much in the future. So for those of you trying to tell me 2020 is the past, I know, but at the time, it's the future. In the event Iron Man 2020, Arno takes up his brother's mantle as he fights against the uprising of machines. Tony at the time felt he was more machine than man, and Arno basically uses this revelation of Tony's to discredit him, taking his place and becoming Iron Man in his stead. In the end, Arno would basically be driven mad while trying to save humans from machines by attempting to take control of all life, both organic and AI, in order to protect them. Don't worry though, because Tony would defeat Arno and kind of put him in a dream state to make him hopefully be happy until he wakes up and realizes all of the things he thinks he's been living have been a lie, which will probably not be good. I don't think that's happened yet though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are enjoying our content here, why not head on over to Facebook and follow us there. We have lots of bonus content coming your way, giveaways and other good stuff, so go on over there and click that follow button. Number 8. Darkhold Iron Man. The Darkhold Iron Man tale gives us a glimpse into a dark alternate future for our hero. In this reality, when Tony Stark first makes the Iron Man suit, something in his programming basically goes wrong. This causes the suit to remove Tony's skin when it is put on and then removed. Tony learns this the hard way. While working on the suit to try and fix this issue, he feels a compulsion to put it on as though the suit is calling to him. And seemingly, without thinking, he finds himself doing so, eventually even putting on the helmet. The Iron Man suit works to remove Tony's skin and then eventually breaks down his skull and his bones, merging with him fully so that the suit can never actually be removed without killing Tony, because now they're kind of one being. But why would he ever want to remove this suit? Driven insane, in the end Tony Stark believes that the Iron Man suit is actually the way of the future and offers one to every human, turning the population into a bunch of techno-organic iron suit human hybrid monster things permanently, including his friends and his loved ones who he also forces into suits. Ugh. Earth, which would be really terrible because they know what's gonna happen. At least those people are unsuspecting and they're just like, ah, free iron suit, that sounds lovely. Let me run into this and see what happens. Better or worse, if you see it coming or if you're surprised by it. I don't know. I feel like if you see it coming, it's worse in my mind. Number 7, Earth 928 Iron Man. Earth 928 is widely accepted as the main continuity for Earth 2099. This is the same one that Miguel O'Hara, the main Miguel anyways, aka Spider-Man 2099, hails from. The sad reality is that in this continuity, there isn't really a future Iron Man to speak of. What we do learn about Tony Stark's future here is that the Doom of 2099 has dealt with Stark technology before, and that there is basically no alternate Iron Man within scanning distance of Flipside. Flipside appears in Spider-Man 2099, issue number 29, from the 90s, and appears to be scanning for copies of heroes of old so that it can basically copy their traits and abilities, adopting them to become a copy of them itself. Instead of running into any Earth 928 Iron Man though, Flipside ends up running into Miguel and becomes a copycat of Spider-Man 2099 instead. So like I said, as far as we know, there is no Iron Man 2099 in the main 2099 reality. There was a future for Tony, but we don't really know about it. We just know that he was there until he wasn't. Number 6, Stark Fujikawa. While Iron Man of Earth 928 appears to be dead, there is also the existence in this future of the Stark Fujikawa organization, one of the main corporations that rules over the future Earth, along with such powerful companies as Alchemex. While Tony Stark is not among the powerful heads of the company and is not the future CEO, presumed to be dead on Earth 928, in the alternate 2099 future reality of Earth 96099, Iron Man's likeness, at least, does live on. In this reality, Iron Man's likeness is used in advertising for the Stark Fujikawa organization, implying that Tony's future was somewhat tied to the company. At least, like I said, in this alternate 2099 reality, which isn't the main 2099 reality, but yeah, there are lots of alternate 2099 timelines. It's confusing. Although once again, we still don't really know the fate of Tony Stark even here, where his name and likeness still seem to reappear, but the rest is a mystery.
Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself in 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner. Number 4, Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful. Number 3, Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as the hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it. Number 2, Kronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now he was a criminal his entire life, and finally, when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Kronos, in the DC animated universe, Kronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Kronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids. Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that could take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom, and being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm going to go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul.
Number 10, The Immortal. With a name like The Immortal, you bet your socks this guy has been around for a hot minute. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites, making him one of the 3 known beings in the universe that can make that claim. But outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to activate. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he's been a knight, possibly under King Arthur as Lancelot, an explorer under or possibly as Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of this guy Abraham Lincoln you might have heard of, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe.
And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Hey. Click it! Number 9, The Darkness. The story featuring this host of The Darkness is so vicious and bloody, but also just so raw and emotional. I love it personally. While many think of a Jackie Estacado when they think of The Darkness, he is not the only host The Darkness entity has ever had, which honestly, if you're familiar with the story of Jackie, you probably also kind of know that because, you know, it gets passed down. In fact, there were many who came before Jackie. Case in point, Estacado, the Darkness host who is a leader of a Visigoth tribe during the final days of the ancient Roman Empire, circa 410 BC. After its downfall had really already begun, done, and some would say even kind of already concluded, I guess. Estacado is a known rebel against the Roman Empire, and a powerful one at that, wielding the darkness in his fight against the last standing Roman legions. He ends up going head to head with Legatus and his legion after already dying and being resurrected by the darkness twice. While he offers Legatus a chance to surrender, Legatus knows he is doomed either way, since the Roman Empire is coming to an end, and so chooses not to back down, as he doesn't really see surrendering as a real option given the punishment for doing so, were they even able to make it back home at this point. As such, Legatus's legion falls, and Estacado makes plans to march with his tribe to Rome.
Number 8. Ogon Bat. Okay, Ogon Bat is a unique and cool character in his own right, but he was also one of the world's first superheroes ever, even technically coming before Superman. Originating from Japan as the god of justice and protector of the weak, his origin is that he was originally an Atlantean who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to defend the modern world from evil. He wields a scepter that fires bolts of energy, causes mini earthquakes, and slices through steel. He himself was immortal, could fly, breathe underwater, had X-ray vision, and possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability to bullets and lasers. He was summoned by a little girl who would call on him, causing a sparkle to appear around, which then turned into a bat, and then turned into the hero when it's found its enemy. It's very weird, but we just roll with it. While he initially started as a comic, he also has a TV show that appeared in several different countries outside of Japan, and I think he looks really cool. So, yeah.
Number 7. Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider is an interesting one. While I initially thought of the prehistoric Ghost Rider Ghost when it came to old Ghost Riders, I realized that despite being from an alternate future, Cosmic Ghost Rider is also ancient. But you know, future ancient. Cosmic Ghost Rider is the spirit of Frank Castle, who ends up becoming the spirit of vengeance after he is killed during Thanos' invasion of Earth. In this version of the story, Thanos succeeds in basically destroying Earth, and by the time Frank returns as Ghost Rider to the planet's surface, it's kinda too late for him to save his friends. He ends up alone on the planet, and after years and years of solitude with no one left to avenge, becomes, well, insane, as I think pretty much almost anyone would. Despite eventually becoming Thanos' herald, CGR is really doing his best to be a good guy. He only ever really even joined up with Thanos because, you know, well, there was no one left and he didn't want to be alone. Before even joining up with Thanos, Cosmic Ghost Rider did attempt to get his revenge on the Mad Titan, teaming up with Galactus, but even Galactus fell in this fight against this alternate King Thanos.
Number 6. Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France. Does that count as ancient? I don't know, anyone who was around then, so I'm taking it and just running with it, okay? Cool. What you gonna do about it? Nothing, because I'm just an image on your screen. As an adult, Bene was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force, which were then improved further thanks to the mutant apocalypse. But thanks to Big Blue, Exodus was trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in this mutant, although he still regularly kicks some serious butt. Number 5. The Immortal. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago in the Image Comics Invincible universe, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites. Outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Oh. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to finally kick in. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he has been a knight, possibly under King Arthur, an explorer connected to Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of Abraham Lincoln, became president of the United States by taking the alias of someone you may know, Abraham Lincoln, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he finally officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe. Coming in at number 4, Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France, so he is probably one of the youngest people to make this list. As an adult, Bennet was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force. This granted Bennet some pretty powerful telepathic powers, but pretty quickly, these powers were then improved upon thanks to the mutant Apocalypse, and his ability to augment other individuals. Unfortunately, Apocalypse also caused Exodus to be trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause, which you think would make him a villain, but he has become more of a hero as time has gone on. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in him. Still, pretty powerful though. Number 3, the Eternals. Way back in the day, the Celestials came to Earth when proto-humans began to emerge, meaning around 2 to 5 million years ago. That's a long freaking time. The Celestial first host performed genetic experiments on those early humans, resulting in 3 groups. The Immortal and Superior Eternals, the pretty grotesque and monstrous deviants, and just plain Jane regular humans. The Eternals, aka Homo Immortalis, were basically created to defend the planet Earth, specifically from the deviants, and to serve Celestials. They became somewhat silent defenders of Homo sapiens, that's us, secluding themselves and rarely directly engaging with us. They built super impressive cities like Olympia, Titanos, Oceania, and Polaria, and their names have become intertwined with heroes throughout ancient history, like Gilgamesh. They are all incredibly powerful, and they are all immortal, being reborn if they ever actually are defeated. An average Eternal is intertwined with cosmic energy and can lift about 15 tons without using any form of telekinesis, but a few are able to lift up to 100 tons. Other Eternals specialize in different powers like telepathy and telekinesis, and all Eternals have the ability to join with one another to form the Unimind, made of light, mind, and pure energy. And I haven't even talked about the massive Eternals called the Hex, and I'm not going to, because we're moving on. Coming in at number 2, Eternal Warrior. Gilad Anipada from Valiant Comics was ancient before the rise of the Pharaohs, and apparently will also survive the fall of nations yet to come. Gilad, also known as the Eternal Warrior, is the youngest of 3 Eternal brothers. His siblings are Ivar, aka Time Walker, and Aram, aka Armstrong. They're all immortal and were born before recorded history, so that's a long time ago. The Eternal Warrior himself is a sworn protector to the Geomancers, who are basically humans who have a special bond with the spirit of the earth itself. When the current Geomancer is accidentally taken out by Obadiah Archer, Gilad is driven by his duty to track down Obadiah and exact revenge. Only problem is, Archer happens to be one half of Archer and Armstrong. Armstrong being Gilad's older brother that we just talked about, who he hasn't spoken to in decades. Armstrong tries to protect his best buddy Archer from his brother, but the relentless Gilad eventually catches up to them, and the duo's only solution now is to find a new Geomancer. Archer and Armstrong eventually track down the new Geomancer, Kay McHenry, who convinces Gilad to not obliterate the duo, which Gilad is more than capable of doing with his thousands of years of fighting experience, his mastery in tactics, and being one of the greatest warriors on Earth. Not to mention his exceptional strength, inhuman durability, and endurance, and the ability to heal from pretty much any wound. And finally, in at number 1, it's Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter, aka John Johns, or John Jones on Earth, is the last of his race of Martians, and he is extremely powerful, and should never be slept on, but he usually is. He speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who's been around for a very hot minute, and that's because he has been. According to DC, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old. John arrived on Earth after he was pulled there through space and time by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdl, who passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian shortly after this. But way before that, John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now, pulled forward in time and finally on Earth with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shape-shifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world, not like that, and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful and ancient members as well.
At number 10, we have Superboy from Superboy Annual 1996. In a distant future, the Superboy mantle is taken up by a being named Quetzal, who comes from the planet Aztlan. And instead of the classic origin story, this future world gives the title of Superman to those selected as champions by the god Quetzalcoatl, which is basically a giant flying snake that seems to be based on an ancient religious text from Aztec culture, but that's just how Superman gets his name. Superboy is the apprentice to that champion known as Superman in this storyline. He's pretty short-lived, naturally only lasting the one annual issue, but he's got a cool new costume design and has a different cultural background than the Superboy we're used to, which is interesting to see. At number 9, we have Superman from Superman Man of Steel Annual 1996. Side note, in case you didn't already know, there was a crossover spanning through all of the DC annuals in 1996 called Legends of Dead Earth, which framed DC stories in a dystopian future. So it was a good year for a list like this. Regardless, in this future, a future version of Lex Luthor is leader of the Galactic Empire and is systematically destroying all planets that show potential to foster the birth of new Supermen. But as he's preparing to destroy a planet called Hydros, a rebel force sneaks onto the planet and saves its only remaining survivor, Caleb. Once he leaves the planet, he's able to absorb the radiation from a nearby star and becomes the new Superman of that time. At number 8, we have All-Star Superman. Now, this Superman is part of a completely different continuation of that which comic book fans have been following. Known to generally take place around the pre-crisis continuity, this alternate continuation goes on into a distant future during the course of the 12-issue maxi series. And it follows the adventure of a Superman who is facing death at the hands of Lex Luthor, who gives him a fatal dose of solar radiation. And with his remaining time in existence, he decides to carry out a number of tasks, including creating Earth Q, which refers to the real timeline that we're used to, and repairing the sun as well, which he does by flying right into it, sacrificing himself in the process. This version of the hero is back to basics. He comes off as very simple and relaxed in his demeanor, without the burdens of past traumatic adventures from the current timeline. At number 7 is the Superman from Last Night on Earth. In this Elseworld future, the world is in a very dark place as a result of global warming, and Lex Luthor and Superman are debating over good and evil, with a very brutal consequence on the line for the losing party: getting impaled by kryptonite. And the judges who choose the winner, all of humanity of course. And although it appears that Superman has won the debate by the end, humanity chooses to impale Superman instead of Lex Luthor, leaving him, well, dead. The following events take place as a result of his death and is largely considered more of a Batman storyline, but for a time there we catch a glimpse of yet another futuristic version of Superman, one who chooses to use his words over his fists, I guess. At number 6, we have Mon-El, aka Lar Grand, from the Legion of Superheroes. This guy is sort of veering towards being a knockoff version of Superman, since he's known to be a superhero inspired by Superboy, who is himself already a copy of Superman in a way. Either way, this futuristic version of the hero is actually vulnerable to lead instead of kryptonite, and is sent to the Phantom Zone by Superboy when he's fatally poisoned. A lot of Superman being poisoned in this list, I'm realizing. Future's not so bright. Either way, he's put into the Phantom Zone for his own protection, but when a 30th century version of Brainiac, Brainiac 5, finds a cure to his poisoning, Mon-El returns and becomes a member of the Legion of Superheroes. and actually take Superboy's place in his future timeline.
Number 5. Dark Knight Returns. This is an older version of Bruce from Frank Miller's alternate future reality of Earth 31. Here Batman comes out of retirement when Harvey Dent returns. To make matters worse, the Joker also escapes custody. Not only does Batman have Dent, the Joker, and the criminal scum of Gotham to contend with, but Superman is also after him as well. In this reality, Superman had become a government hero, becoming the loyal ally to the President of the United States. Kind of like his guard dog, really. And the President of the United States does not take too kindly to Batman's return. In the end, the two must face off in a famous fight that would go on to inspire multiple narratives, including the Batman v Superman film from the DCEU. Number 4. Damian Wayne. One of the darkest Batmen to arise would be Damian Wayne's Batman. Damian takes up the cape and cowl in a possible future story featured in Batman issue 666. Get it? 666. Known as Batman in Bethlehem. Batman in Bethlehem is a story where in the future, Damian Wayne sells his soul to Satan in order to ensure Gotham's protection. This drastic measure happens in a world where people really are looking for some kind of security as climate change, war, and acts of terror threaten the entire planet, turning it into a hellish futuristic landscape. This future version of Damian, who becomes Batman, also seems to be impervious to gunfire and no longer restrains himself from killing those who oppose him. Kinda like my dad was here so that I could be this Batman later. I feel like Daddy Batman would not be too happy with you, Damian. He would be like, don't kill people, but you're gonna do what you're gonna do. I guess it's a different world. Number 3. Thomas Wayne. Although it might seem weird to put Thomas Wayne on this list as he's Batman's father and so in a way is part of his past, in the alternate future known as Flashpoint, Thomas actually becomes Batman instead of Bruce. This is after Bruce is killed, causing Thomas to make a plan to get vengeance and inspiring him to become a vigilante fighting for justice on the streets of Gotham. Martha, however, kinda goes the opposite way with it. The death of Bruce causes her to basically go insane. Unable to move on or let go, she ends up haunted by his memory and becomes the villain known as the Joker, becoming Thomas's sworn nemesis, despite the love that they once shared. What a tragic story. Number 2. Dick Grayson. Helena isn't the only one to carry on Batman and Catwoman's legacy on Earth 2. Let's not forget that before Helena was born, Batman had an adoptive son in the boy wonder known as Robin, aka Dick Grayson. Often known as the original Robin across many different worlds. On Earth 2, Dick Grayson would end up taking his adoptive father's mantle before Helena did and operate as Batman for a time. He settles down with Barbara Gordon and the two even have a son together who they name John. Dick, however, loses the use of his legs when he becomes paralyzed by the Joker shooting him through the stomach, which damages his spine. Sound familiar? Dick would later become Oracle. In this reality, Barbara ends up as a cop who gets shot and dies while attempting to help her family flee Darkseid's invasion. Their son John grows up to become his Aunt Helena's sidekick, Robin. Super cute. I like it. Not Babs' death though. I don't like that. That's not nice. Number 1. Terry McGinnis. When it comes to Batman, there are actually a lot of people who would be suited to don the cape and cowl. Sometimes in his stead, and other times as those who would take up the mantle after he dies or he retires. In the case of Terry McGinnis, he was pretty much created to become the new Batman. Using Bruce's own DNA, Amanda Waller designed Terry as part of her project Batman Beyond. She basically overwrote the reproductive DNA of Terry's father and chose the McGinnis family to create the modern genetic Bruce Wayne duplicate because their psychological profiles were close matches to Bruce's own parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, which means that, when Terry grows up, he should be pretty much a perfect replica. Even more so if his parents had been assassinated like Amanda wanted, but didn't work out for Waller there. Probably for the best though. I don't think you should assassinate people's parents just to turn them into Batman. That seems pretty messed up, even for Amanda Waller. Number 10. The Question. In the Prime Earth continuity, the Question, or a version of the Question, is revealed to be one of the oldest beings in the world of DC. This is revealed after we learn that the Question was one of the criminals in essence that the Circle of Eternity, located at the Rock of Eternity, chose to punish for their crimes against humanity. This group of beings who were punished were known as the Trinity of Sin. The Question would go on to become a hero following this. This version of the Question is largely a mysterious figure who has not appeared as much, probably because the original version of the character Vic Sage and his predecessor Renee Montoya ended up both returning to the comics recently. What we do know is that the Question had his memory erased from history and from himself, with even his face being left completely featureless, so he could never remember who he was. This was part of his punishment, but also done to guarantee that the Question would not be able to rise up once more as he had threatened to do originally, since he would no longer be able to remember what exactly he had done and why in the first place. So how can he return if he doesn't even know, why he was doing it in the first place? And apparently, we may never get to know any of this either, unless somebody returns to tell the rest of this version of the question's tale. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love superheroes that are surprisingly old, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. The Eternals. The Eternals are simply a group of heroes most people don't often think of, which is why I'm including them here. Despite them coming to the MCU, I would still say there are tons out there who have fallen off the MCU bandwagon recently and kind of just weren't particularly compelled to watch this film. So there are still a lot who do not know about the Eternals, which is unfortunate. This is a huge shame, I think, because the Eternals are really a cool group of heroes who have existed for millennia. Initially, their origin was that they were prehistoric humans who were basically modified by celestial tech, turned into their own race of beings. Later on, we'd get an additional bit of information on their origin in terms of kind of how they worked, how they operated, with them being resurrected by the Great Machine on the regular anytime they died. That's how they were eternal, almost being like kind of androids with a soul in a sense at one point. The Great Machine is actually also Earth, which is both a big blue ball that everyone lives on and at its core an actual machine, a resurrection machine in part. Its survival is intrinsic to the survival of Earth and all life forms living on it, and it was, up until recently, also tied to the Eternals, meaning that for Earth to continue, the Eternals would also have to continue to be called into existence. The Eternals, being ancient heroes, were initially the enemies of the Deviants, who were also created by the Celestials. They defended Earth against the Dark Celestials, or they tried to, and have also become ingrained in human mythology, with them being the real-world heroes from ancient epics and folklore. Hawkgirl. While Hawkman recently appeared in Black Adam in the DCEU, which has been rebranded with their highly anticipated reset impending as simply the DCU, Hawkman isn't the only hero out there who is ancient among the Justice Society. And no, I'm not talking about Dr. Fate, who also is pretty old. In fact, many people probably didn't even know that Hawkman was really even ancient per se. He doesn't look old, that's for sure, but he is, in fact, not in body, but in soul. Hawkman is the reincarnated soul of ancient Egyptian Prince Khufu Qatar. Carter Hall is only the latest in a line of incarnations of the prince in the comics, and his love, Sheara, was also reincarnated as well throughout the years, becoming known as the hero Hawkgirl and also as Hawkwoman. Later, this origin would be retconned, tweaked somewhat, so they'd actually be even older than ancient Egypt, instead becoming ancient aliens from the planet Thanagar, who simply came to Earth. Their original souls in this version of the tale were each believed to belong to Shra and Qatar the Deathbringer, who were both cursed to be reincarnated alongside each other throughout eternity. Number 7. Gaia. Gaia is someone that we perhaps don't think of as being an ancient superhero because, well, we just don't really think of Gaia that much. She hails from Marvel Comics and is the goddess of Earth. Gaia is seen as one of the oldest gods that Marvel has to offer us, being one of their elder gods. In fact, Gaia is kind of one of the only elder gods who could be seen as heroic or good. At least one of I would say she's up there, considering she is one of the few who managed to avoid becoming a demon. She also actively sought out the Demiurge in order to produce offspring that would help to rid the universe of the other elder gods who had been corrupted after they became demonic, giving birth to Atom, who then became the Demigorge, the God Eater. She's probably also one of the oldest heroes mentioned on this list at all, so there's also that. Number 6. Nubia. Nubia is possibly even older than most other Amazons, who are generally known for being old and immortal just standardly. In Infinite Frontier, her story was retconned so that she was no longer a woman held and mistreated against her will for a long time, but a princess reborn in the Well of Souls. Nubia was born from the Well of Souls reincarnated around the same time that Princess Diana was born, and the two grew up often being thought of as sisters. And if you're wondering why I was mentioning that she might be older than some of the other Amazons, that's just because she's reincarnated. So although Nubia in her own form is around the same age as Diana, she also got an old soul, you know what I mean? She would spend many years as the guardian of Doom's doorway, and would act as a loyal supporter to Queen Hippolyta, even when it seemed that she had betrayed her. In fact, Nubia's loyalty to the Amazons in the current continuity has not failed, and she even recently was chosen to be the new queen of the Amazons. And we're not just talking about the Amazons of Themyscira either, but in fact all known Amazons in existence, as there are actually multiple Amazonian tribes in existence throughout the world.
Number 5. 5, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but he didn't really do much and was never really mentioned until very recently. Uranos the Undying is an Eternal and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the deviants and humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into a civil war. Ultimately, Uranos lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed on the world. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranus for help in Axe Judgment Day number 1. And he definitely did help, as in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other powerful Omega level mutants. Number 4, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife, Hegra, and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough for him. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all exists. So he's a conqueror, sure, but he's also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. I don't even know how that works. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing for millions of other worlds while on his way to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his son Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War. Number 3, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. So yes, he is incredibly ancient. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. You see, Kulan Gath had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath sought out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by taking the life of and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan the Barbarian, Kulan was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence into a magical amulet. So yes, he pulled a Voldemort and made a Horcrux. After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger, who donned the amulet, allowing Kulan Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead and never possessed by Gath. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to make sure that you never get back. Number 2, the Great Darkness. So great. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, which is, I think I said that right, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, it was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the three main figures of hell to form a union with each other just in case it decided to attack them, which it didn't. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing, of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as yin and yang, or as a balance, that kind of thing. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also it's kind of just a force of nature. Sort of. Number 1, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose the bigger, more dangerous, and surprisingly not well-known Pappy of Galactus? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Thimble Winter, was the one who brought the end to the 6th iteration of the cosmos, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, the one who becomes Galactus, alive. The Black Winter essentially made Galen his herald, so when the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe, in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possessed the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's nuts! That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. But luckily, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe. He's just here for his herald, Galactus. But still, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter completely, and it's incredibly awesome. And
Number 10, Ultimate Deadpool. While the Ultimate timeline is said to be parallel to the 616 main continuity timeline, technically the Ultimate continuity of Earth 1610 is still set in the future by comparison. The Ultimate line was actually meant to shake things up, chiefly by giving stories a more updated and modern setting. That was one of the major ways it differed, as its continuity didn't extend back to the 1960s and further back beyond that. Add in the fact that the Ultimate version of Deadpool is later revealed to be a cyborg, having fully converted to match their fellow Reaver brethren, and you have a pretty futuristic version of Deadpool here. Basically, evil robot Deadpool in this universe. Number 9, Horsemen of Apocalypse. In this alternate reality of Earth 16558, Deadpool was chosen to become a Horseman of Apocalypse. Here, Deadpool was ordered to join the rest of the Horsemen in defeating and destroying the young X-Men who were trespassers in their home of Omega World, and retrieving the Ark that they carried with them, which held within it hundreds of mutant embryos. In this reality, many of Apocalypse's choices for his horsemen are actually not really mutant in origin. Also on this deadly team is Venom and Moon Knight. Later, Colossus, who attempts to buy time for the young X-Men, is also recruited into their ranks, being the only technical mutant other than Apocalypse on the team. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Deadpool lists or more future alternate versions lists, be sure to let us know by clicking that like and commenting below. Also, if you haven't already, go follow us on Facebook. We got some cool stuff for you over there. Number 8, Deadman Wade. Deadman Wade appears in the Age of Apocalypse alternate future reality. Here, Apocalypse succeeds in taking over the world, and Deadpool is recruited into becoming one of his Pale Riders. In this reality, Deadpool is not much of a jokester, but instead is extremely sad and quite depressed. As a Pale Rider, he is constantly mistreated by Danny Moonstar, his teammate, who is also part of the Pale Riders in this reality. Deadpool in this reality is rapidly decaying, which causes him to feel immense pain, almost all the time. In the end, he is killed by Nightcrawler, who teleports his head away from his body to do so. Deadman Wade, however, would later be resurrected and would go on to join the evil Deadpool Corps, appearing alongside them in the series Deadpool Kills Deadpool. Number 7, Agent Deadpool. This Deadpool is never really given a name like most alternates who appear as a member of the evil Deadpool Corps. However, he does seem to have some pretty fancy tech and the ability to body slide and, I would assume, potentially time slide. He appears in Deadpool Kills Deadpool Deadpool, a series by Cullen Bunn where Dreadpool seeks to create his own team of evil Deadpools so that he might use them to wipe out every Deadpool in the Marvel multiverse. Dreadpool, by the way, is the same version of Deadpool known for killing the entire Marvel universe. Agent Deadpool, as I've chosen to call him, is one of Dreadpool's agents who appears in the first issue of Deadpool Kills Deadpool. He takes out Headpool, Golden Age Deadpool, and sadly, Dogpool, before Deadpool of the main reality of Earth 616 avenges their deaths by killing Agent Deadpool in turn, using Agent Deadpool's own anti-regeneration or anti-Deadpool ray. Number 6. Eternity Deadpool. This Deadpool only makes a brief appearance in Doom War issue number 5. Here Deadpool is recruited into a mission to help retrieve the 10,000 tons of vibranium that Dr. Doom stole from Wakanda. When Deadpool passed through the Nowhere Room, he's turned temporarily into kind of a splat of goo and organs. I say temporarily because, well, he's Deadpool, so he does get better because he got that healing factor. And quite quickly too, I will say. During this time, however, we also get a glimpse into multiple alternate versions of Deadpool from the multiverse, one of which happens to be a version in which Deadpool goes on to become the new Eternity.
Number 5. Pappy Banner. And from happiness back to tears again. Ready to talk about Old Man Logan? Yet again? Good. Basically, in this dystopian future where the villains all banded together to take out all of the heroes, Wolverine has become a farmer, a simple man trying to just make ends meet and keep his family alive. But the main antagonist in this tale is the Hulk gang, made up of the incestuous children and grandchildren of Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, and what he claims was his cousin Jennifer Walters, as in She-Hulk. This gang of horrible Hulks was led by none other than the one true Pappy Banner himself. Pappy Banner doesn't need to change his form to access the powers of the Hulk. In the fight between Old Man Logan and Pappy Banner, this regular human Bruce Banner was tossing cows and throwing punches that sent Logan flying. But when he did transform, he grew to a massive, overweight, maniacally twisted version of the Hulk that ate Old Man Logan whole. Well, until Logan healed up and burst out of the Hulk's stomach, so that's nice. Number 4. Hulk The End. The End series chronicles the last days of various characters in the Marvel Universe. For a lot of doomsday type stories, it often ends in the Earth being destroyed in a nuclear war. But what remains after that? Well, basically, the Hulk remains. As the only human left on planet Earth, Bruce Banner wanders the wastes in an eternal struggle with himself, as in an eternal struggle with the Hulk. Basically, Bruce has seen the deaths of all those he loved, all those he cared about. There's nothing left in this world for him, and he would prefer to just pass on. But no matter what he does, the Hulk does not let him. Speaking of the big green Goliath, he thinks Banner's will to pass away is a puny human thought, and he wants to be the strongest there is and to just be left alone. The two of them have a huge internal falling out. Eventually, Bruce has a heart attack, and while Hulk himself goes on to survive somehow, he now realizes just how alone he really is. Damn. Number 3. Breaker of Worlds. The Breaker of Worlds Hulk first appeared in a kind of side story within the Immortal Hulk storyline. In an alternate timeline, the Immortal Hulk becomes possessed by the One Below All, who went rampaging until the end of time, and the end of this iteration of the multiverse. He has destroyed everything, literally everything. He has defeated Franklin Richards, Galactus, all the cosmic entities, and these shattered planets and crushed stars with his bare hands. The story itself follows an alien that had explored out trying to find out if anything was left in the universe, and there wasn't. This alien is living in the 9th cosmos, meaning the 9th version of the multiverse after the Immortal Hulk / the One Below All destroyed the last version. This new 9th multiverse is in tatters though. The One Below All Hulk has consumed the souls of every being he has destroyed, bolstering his own power enough so that he is planet-sized and just flies around like a living curse, ending all things in existence until there is nothing left. Ever. Luckily, the alien sent a warning far into the past to the present time. The Breaker of Worlds is what happens when the One Below All wins, and it's not good. Coming in at number 2 is Space Punisher Hulk. This version of the Hulk in the really awesome Space Punisher story is a 4-armed, 30-foot tall murderous monstrosity. He completely took out the Fantastic Four, he bit Sabretooth in half, took off Deadpool's head and threw him out into space, and he completely decimated a group of 6 Watchers, as in the race that Uatu the Watcher is a part of. And if you don't know, the Watchers are sort of on par in power to Galactus, so yes, this is pretty impressive. The future space version of the Hulk is more like an exoskeleton with Bruce Banner contained within the Hulk's chest, but they are still separate entities, allowing Punisher to end the life of Bruce Banner, which in turn allows the Hulk to just jump off into space and leave everyone alone. It's intense, it's really weird, it's extremely brutal as you'd expect from a Punisher story, and we love it. And coming in at number 1 is Maestro. If we are talking about alternate future versions of the Hulk, you'd be just a big ol' silly Billy if you thought we weren't gonna talk about the evil ruler of Dystopia, the possible future version of the Hulk, Maestro. Maestro is the far future ruler of a megacity that rose up after the events of a nuclear war. After being exposed to so much extra radiation, he gained extra strength and over time became more and more intelligent. He had powered up enough to be double the strength of the base Hulk and just as smart as Bruce Banner, while also becoming nefariously evil. Earth 616 Hulk ends up traveling forward in time to stop Maestro, which proves to be a much more difficult task than he initially imagined. Hulk's experience with Maestro gave Hulk nightmares of what he could become for years and years and years to come into the future. Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Conan the Barbarian. Conan was born on a carnage-strewn battlefield in the hills of the westernmost region of Chimeria, all the way back in the Hyborian Age, aka around 13 to 10,000 BC. The fact that Conan was born on a battlefield was considered to be an omen that Conan would grow up to be a great warrior one day, and that was not wrong. He was one of the most accomplished swordsmen of the Hyborian Age and is often listed alongside King Arthur, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Zorro as one of the greatest fictional male sword fighters in history, which is a really cool thing to put on a resume. Conan has unusual strength, agility, and speed for a human being. He has lifted immense objects or enemies, even breaking the neck of a raging bull when he was still pretty young. It is said that he has the strength equivalent of about 10 to 20 men, but he has been knocked over by just 2 dudes before, so don't take that as a fact. More often than not, Conan relies upon his lightning-fast reflexes in combat situations, and they very rarely let him down. On top of that, he has a massive level of durability, and through years of dealing with sorcerers, magicians, and witches, he has even developed a moderate level of resistance to magic and mind control spells. Conan is a master warrior. He has a hardy survival instinct, is a master of stealth, and is multilingual. While primarily known as a wandering sellsword, Conan progressively became a master tactician, leading entire armies into battle, and eventually, Conan even became the king of Aquilonia, and also eventually a hero interacting with the heroes of the modern day. In at number 9, it's Red Sonja. If we are talking about Conan the Barbarian, then we need to talk about Red Sonja, because not only is she from the same time period, she's arguably even more capable than Mr. Barbarian himself. Red Sonja lived with her family in a humble home in the western Hyrcanian steppes. I don't know if I pronounced that right, so let me know in the comments down below. When she had just turned 17 years old, a group of mercenaries attacked, taking the lives of her father, Ivor, her mother, and her 2 younger brothers, and burning their house and all their possessions to the ground. Now she survived, but was then horribly mistreated by the leader of that group. Understandably, Sonja raged for some revenge. Answering this, the red goddess Skatok appeared to her and instilled incredible skill in the handling of swords and other weapons under the condition that she would never lay with a man unless he defeated her in combat, which is a weird kind of thing to say, I guess. Going forward as Red Sonja, she honed her skills with the blade and became a sellsword, eventually even slaying the evil wizard Kulan Gath, but he came back. Red Sonja was one of the most powerful and skilled swordsmen in any era, among both men and women. She was also in peak human physical condition, a martial arts expert, and possessed knowledge and experience in fighting the supernatural. And she beat Conan. So, number 8, Hercules. Hercules is the son of Zeus, Skyfather and supreme ruler of the gods of Olympus, and Alcmena, a mortal woman who lived over 3,000 years ago. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, arranged for her father Zeus to have a half-mortal son to be the world's champion. Zeus seduced the mortal queen Alcmena, pretending to be her husband, King Amphitryon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that too. Alcmena gave birth to the baby Hercules, and as an adult demigod in ancient Greece, Hercules achieved worldwide fame as he became the greatest hero of the ancient world, best known for his 12 labors. As the Olympian god of strength as well, Hercules' strength is unlimited, making him one of the strongest and most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. As an infant, he was breastfed by his stepmother, Hera, queen of the Olympian gods, which increased his already demigod physiology to godlike levels. Hercules possessed the superhuman physical attributes of an Olympian god, but interestingly, some of his powers are actually superior to the vast majority of the other gods. Most recently, he has been a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he has also been part of the Avengers, the God Squad, Council of Godheads, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, the Defenders, the Heroes for Hire, and of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. Coming in at number 7 today is Dream. The Endless, featured in DC's Sandman story, are a group of 7 siblings: Death, Destiny, Despair, Desire, Delirium, Destruction, and the focus of our point today, Dream. These siblings represent fundamental aspects and forces of the Vertigo/DC universe, and are all immortal, ageless, and pretty much nigh omnipotent. The parents of the Endless were revealed to be Time, the embodiment of all time itself, father of the Endless, and Night, the embodiment of the infinite darkness that existed before the dawn of the universe, and mother of the Endless. So it's safe to say that these beings are probably pretty ancient, like 10 billion years old ancient. As for Dream himself, or Morpheus, he isn't so much a superhero as we are used to, but he is an extremely powerful, reluctant hero is what I would say, and his journey to that status, from emotionless god to a being displaying very human-like emotions and characteristics, is the fundamental story of the Sandman itself. Dream dwells in a realm called the Dreaming, from where he controls the fundamental concept of fantasy and reality in the universe, as the line between the waking world and the dream world is quite thin. Coming in at number 6, it's Odin. While the god of thunder Thor almost made this list, his father was and sometimes is still a hero, and he is much older than his son, as you might be able to guess, because father and son relationships be like that. While Marvel plays a little fast and loose with Thor's age, it most recently has been said to be roughly 4,000 years old, but his daddy? Marvel Comics changed Odin's age a few times for the sake of stories, but we can assume that Odin is quite old, far more than 1,000,000 years, as Odin was part of the Avengers of 1,000,000 BC, and by that time, he was seemingly in his prime like Thor is now. So yes, the All-Father, creator of Asgard and ruler of the Norse pantheon of gods, is pretty damn old. Who would have thought? Not me. But he is certainly no pushover. Being the protector of the 10 realms, he is the strongest and wisest of all Asgardians. In his physical prime, he could lift 90 tons, but that number can be boosted up a whole lot to a whole other level thanks to Odin's ability to tap into the Odin Force, which has allowed him to headbutt Galactus into unconsciousness, which is really impressive. As an example of the power he wields, Odin had a fight with Seth, another god, which was waged on several planes of existence simultaneously and felt across infinite planes of reality. The energy released from their battle was so powerful, it shattered entire galaxies, reignited dying suns, and ripped the fabric of the multiverse itself. So, yeah. He's pretty nuts.
Number 5, Morlun and the Inheritors. Morlun and the Inheritors sounds like the name of a band. A band of vampires? Not a thing. A coven of vampires, really, I guess I should say. And no, I don't believe they play musical instruments and or perform in any kind of musical acts, sadly. Morlun and the Inheritors are a threat that we meet as we go into the Spider-Verse. They were the main antagonists of the Spider-Verse event in the comics, which promised to feature all the alternate Spider-Men, women, and folks that had ever featured. And they were also the main antagonists of the follow-up event, Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires that feed specifically on what is known as totemic life energy. What is that? What is a totem? It is usually a superpowered or somewhat unique individual who represents some kind of powerful animal instinct or arachnid avatar, like spiders! Morlun specifically is well known for being a main villain of Spider-Man's, and while he's not as prominently featured as, some of other Spidey's villains, he is still particularly powerful. We don't really know, I don't think, how old the Inheritors or Morlun are, at least not in their first life, but we do know they're pretty old, having participated in fights in the multiverse seemingly a long time ago. Also, they'd like to dress up super Victorian, so they gotta at least be from that era or beyond, although they're not necessarily Earth-based villains, they're multiversal villains. Number 4, Sin. Sin might be one that people are a little bit more familiar with in another form, but also there might be a lot of you out there who aren't, as this villain hails from the Spawn comics. If you are up to date with your Spawn reading, then you know who I'm talking about here, but for those of you who aren't up to date, or who maybe have never read Spawn, this villain was actually formerly known as a longtime ally of Al Simmons' Spawn, his mentor in a way, Cogliostro. While initially just seeming like a well-meaning fellow Hellspawn, seeking to teach Al the ropes and also help to guide him away from being fully used as a pawn of hell, Cogliostro is actually later revealed to be more ancient than we might have otherwise thought, in fact also being known by another name even before he was known as Cog. Cain. Yeah, the Cain, the man from biblical myth who killed his brother and was condemned for it, Cain of Cain and Abel. After revealing that he was really only helping Spawn to serve his own interests and becoming a villain, Cog was redeemed once more for a short little while before becoming a villain again, who has the ability to drain the power of other Hellspawns, being known now as Sin. Sin with 2 N's. Number 3, Ramatut. Well, we all know Kang the Conqueror now, thanks to him being featured in the MCU in Quantumania, and the hype for his inclusion in that film being very, very real, I would say at this point. Not everyone is as familiar with the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from Earth 6311. Despite the fact that this is a villain from the future, Kang actually has existed across time in many different forms, adopting the form even of an ancient pharaoh. This was back when Kang was a ruler in ancient Egypt, before he was really even Kang. Nathaniel Richards became obsessed with the reality of Earth 616 and would eventually construct a time machine shaped like a sphinx and use it to travel back in time to around 2960 BC. Having brought with him a robotic army and advanced futuristic weapons, it wasn't long before Nathaniel was the ruler of Egypt, taking the name of Ramatut. This version of Nathaniel also became focused and obsessed on the creation of En-Saba-Nur, who, as Ramatut knew, was destined to become the world's first mutant. Number 2, Perpetua. Perpetua is one of those characters who is super powerful and who tons of people should know about, really, just for that reason alone, I would say. But no. Instead, most folks know more about the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua's son, than they do about her. Granted, this could be because she's simply a newer character, and in that case, I mean, fair enough. She's a newer character, but she's also really old because she's kind of like a retcon character. Perpetua is known for being the first one to create the multiverse, or at least, one of the first people, depending on how you like to reconcile DC lore, because I feel like Perpetua isn't the first one that we've said that about. While Anti-Monitor is the character most well known for causing the crisis on Infinite Earths, it's later revealed that Perpetua was the one truly pulling his strings, and therefore responsible for this crisis. In fact, Perpetua feeds off crisis energy, and is said to have been responsible for all crises we've seen. At least all crises we've seen before Dark Crisis, likely, since I think she was dead when that one actually took place, or at least defeated. Is she still alive? I don't think so. Number 1, Rotath of Lemuria. Heading back to the Hyborian Age once again on one of our ancient lists, which by the way, if you want to visit the Hyborian Age again and again, you should check out part 1 and part 2 of our ancient superheroes list. We got you. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented often in stories from the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. Rotath made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 70s, when everyone was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died though, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return. And so he did, this time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated, this time not by Kull directly, but instead of course after fighting Conan and Juma, and also being defeated by a giant slug, which that part is a little random, but hey.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abracadabra. AKA Citizen Abra, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry David Blaine, gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century, and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-Metal, he just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century, where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9, Gore, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gore lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gore the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's going to be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, Gore the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse. And with powers. Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Caped Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them. Number 7, Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there, he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild. It's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city. All these heroes are missing or they're dead. And the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show. It's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron. So he's safe. You can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future. He's safe. He knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in this story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out. Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who was now an officer in the science police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing.
Number 5, Iron Man 2099. There are actually multiple Iron Man 2099s out there, but one of the most well-known ones is Dr. Sonny Frisco, who first appeared in the 2015 Secret Wars event, making his very first appearance in Secret Wars 2099 issue number 1. While 2099 is a future reality that has been around for some time in the comics, Dr. Sonny Frisco wouldn't appear until later in its continuity. Or a continuity, really. This also, once again, is not the main 2099 continuity. In fact, the 2099 reality actually has multiple different continuities. As I said, it's a lot, it's confusing, but just stick with me here. Frisco's Iron Man hails from one of the fringe continuities known as Earth 23291. Sonny Frisco, however, would later become displaced to the Realityverse 616, following the destruction and recreation of the multiverse as a result of the Secret Wars event. Like Tony Stark of Earth 616, Frisco is also a genius who built his own suit of armor and was a member of the 2099 Avengers, originally brought together by the CEO of Alchemax, Tyler Stone. At least, you know, in that alt 2099 reality. Number 4, MC2 Tony Stark. In the alternate reality of Earth 982, known as MC2, and not to be confused with the 2099 reality of Earth 928, even though those numbers are very similar, Iron Man ends up retiring. This Tony has a life similar to his 616 counterpart in most ways, with only a few differences between them. Namely, that Tony Stark in this reality decided to retire after an epic battle on an alternate Earth, which claimed the lives of many of his friends and fellow heroes, and left Scarlet Witch in a comatose state as a result of her sealing the portal between those two worlds. This devastating battle prompted Tony to retire, although he would seek out someone to carry on his legacy before doing so. Number 3, Mainframe. This is that legacy character for Tony Stark of the other main future reality for 616, known as MC2 Earth 982. Here in this reality, Tony Stark creates his own protege to carry on the Iron Man legacy, using his brain patterns or brain waves blended with an android modeled after his own armor. This android would be known as Mainframe. Mainframe was one of the original members of the MC2 Future Avengers team, editorially known as A-Next, after the name of the comic series that the team appeared in. Mainframe initially was much more by the book as a hero, pretty rigid in their ways. Over time, however, the android would learn to loosen up somewhat and even be considered a close friend to many of his heroic colleagues on the superhero team. Number 2, Andros Stark. Andros Stark is another Iron Man who hails from the 2099 reality. Not the main 2099 reality though. So many alternate timelines. This version of the alternate future Iron Man is actually Tony's grandson, Andros. Andros travels back in time in an attempt to stop his grandfather from creating Vortex. Vortex was initially created by Tony to protect humanity, but ended up turning on humankind instead, infecting the internet and threatening the existence of all human life on Earth in the future. However, in a strange twist, Andros actually ends up learning during his journey back to the past that it was his jaunt back in time that would actually result in the creation of the Vortex virus. The future crisis ends up being averted thanks to this revelation, but unfortunately it also causes Andros to cease to exist. At least this specific version of Andros who traveled back in time. There could very well still be an Andros out there somewhere in the world, one who, you know, didn't have a reason to travel back thanks to the future being saved. This future version of Iron Man 2099 does not appear in the comics, but instead is from the animated series Iron Man Armored Adventures. Number 1, Dr. Anthony Stark. coming full circle now, from 10 to 1. As I said, what if Sorcerer Supreme Tony Stark is not the only one out there? There's also the 2099 AD alternate future Tony Stark, who also ends up as Sorcerer Supreme, known as such or sometimes as Dr. Stranger or Dr. Anthony Stark. Although once again, although this is 2099 AD, this is not the main 2099 reality. This is another splintered continuity. This future version of Tony shows up in Infamous Iron Man when Dr. Doom, as the aforementioned infamous Iron Man, appears into the future. However, this future version of Tony would also appear initially in the 2014 all-new X-Men annual, where Tempest would run into him when she attempted to return to the reality where her husband and daughter existed. However, Stark would inform her that this reality no longer existed, and he would actually urge Tempest to return to her original timeline, the continuity of Earth 616.
In at 10, Hercules. I think we all know the story of Hercules, whatever version you remember. The Disney animated movie, the DC version, the Roman or the Greek version, it's all generally the same thing. And I mean, even after that, this guy has a rap sheet of like 25 other heroic things he did, just like because he wanted to. A major factor in the well-known tragedies surrounding Hercules is the hatred that the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, had for him. Because while there were many illegitimate offspring that Zeus, sired, let's say, Hercules was the son of an affair that Zeus had with a mortal woman. And not just any mortal woman, but a mortal that Zeus wanted so badly that he disguised himself as her husband in order to lay with her, and ordered Helios, the god of the sun, to not let the sun rise for 72 hours so that his one last night with her would last. Yeah, so not only is he the bastard of a mortal woman, he's also the product of a forced 3-day night, which I guess doesn't really bother anyone living in like Alaska or Norway, because the whole 6 months of night thing, not anything weird.
Number 9. Odin. Odin ended up joining the Stone Age Avengers sometime after he actually was said to have created the humans on Midgard, which was then known as Asheim. In doing so, he had disappointed his father Bor, who decided to punish Odin by hurting the humans. Now, as someone who often seems pretty detached from human suffering later in his life, it's pretty wild to think that Odin possibly created them and was perhaps one of the first cosmic beings to actually care for them as a superhero. And I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, we all know Odin is super old. Yeah, you know that, but did you know he was this heroic? Because I always find it very surprising myself. Odin ended up returning to Asheim to act as its protector and also to learn how to better control Mjolnir, which was his hammer at the time. He ended up befriending multiple prehistoric superheroes, joining the Avengers of 1 million BCE, and he also ended up developing a deeply romantic relationship with his teammate, the Lady Phoenix. In fact, it was even revealed that the Phoenix was actually the true mother of his son, Thor, because that's what's happening now, so there we go.
In at 8, Blue Beetle. In 1964, during the Silver Age of comics, Charlton Comics revised the character of Dan Garrett, the original Blue Beetle, for a new Blue Beetle series. Charlton's new Blue Beetle retained the original's name, but no powers or backstory, making him a different character. This Beetle was an archaeologist version of Dan, who obtained a number of superhuman powers including super strength, flight, supervision, ability to generate energy blasts from a mythical scarab that he found during a dig in Egypt, where it had been used to imprison an evil mummified pharaoh, because of course it was, which gave way for the DC Comics version of Jaime Reyes. DC's introduction of Jaime Reyes in 2006 retconned and expanded upon the Blue Beetle mythos, but given that the scarab was found during a dig in Egypt, where it was used as an attempt to overthrow Vandal Savage back in the 26th century BCE. Yeah, that's pretty ancient to me, okay? I mean, the scarab was created by Nabu, for God's sakes.
Number 7. Iron Fist. Fan Fei is the Iron Fist of the Stone Age Avengers, also known as the Avengers of 1 million BCE. Fan Fei is actually the reason why the ritual to become the Iron Fist and gain its unique powers was all about fighting Shao Lao in a battle to the death. This wasn't, however, because Kunlun wanted to challenge Fan at the time and believed she should, be their champion. This actually happened as the result of a punishment. Fan Fei, you see, was a kung fu master who had been trained since birth in Kunlun, but her curiosity of the outside world caused her to sort of leave Kunlun in secret. She came across cavemen who were helpless against the beasts that basically often attacked them, and she decided she was going to help them. Fan sought to help these people by teaching and training them herself in the ways of kung fu. However, it was forbidden in Kunlun to share your knowledge, and when her people found out, they marked her as a criminal. As punishment, her students were brought to Shao Lao and basically fed to the dragon. Forced to watch, Fan Fei went into a rage, breaking her shackles, seeking seeking to share in the same demise as her students, becoming deeply distraught. However, when she went up against Xiao Lao, she struck the dragon and her fist went right through, killing it, and coating her fist in its blood, giving her the power to channel her chi into fiery fists, and leaving her with a dragon mark, which marks her as the Iron Fist.
And at 6, Dr. Fate. Nabu the Wise was a Lord of Order and cosmic being who arrived at Earth billions of years ago to take on a proactive role in battling the Lords of Chaos. A cosmic being with near limitless magical power, his spirit resides in the Helmet of Fate and is the source of the great power held by those who wear the mantle of Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is just the helmet. Fun fact, you all knew that. Dr. Fate's origins begin over 10 billion years ago, which I personally think qualifies as ancient, or maybe even older than that, if there is anything older than that. I don't know. My senior year Comtech teacher was pretty old. But not long after the formation of the universe, were there born two elemental forces, the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. You can kind of see where this conflict is going. On the world called Celia, the Lords of Order manifested themselves, the first sentient race in the universe, and a race of incorporeal magical beings at that. After millennia, circa 3500 BCE, the Lords of Order descended onto Earth and then became Nabu the Wise, who was also an advisor to the pharaohs of Egypt. He's old, okay? I don't know what else I need. I said 10 billion years. I think that's pretty solid.
Number 5, Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, yeah, you get it. You saw the movie, you know what I'm doing. Doctor Strange's greatest nemesis is also one of the most powerful ancient evils in the Marvel Universe across the multiverse. Ruler of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu is an interdimensional entity capable of existing for eons, capable of all sorts of impressive magical feats like conjuration, being able to summon creatures under his dominion, even bending the law of physics to his will. Dormammu is already crazy strong, but it's only amplified more if he's in the Dark Dimension, his home turf. Now he doesn't just get a home field advantage by being there because the sun's not in his eyes. He's able to siphon energy directly from the Dark Dimension to fuel himself, as well as draining his followers for their energy. Dormammu is the perfect foil for a hero like Doctor Strange, an incredibly powerful, omnipotent being who can't be defeated outright with traditional brawls or fisticuffs, and needs to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered. Luckily, the Sorcerer Supreme usually has a handle on it. Usually.
Number 4, the Chaos King. The entity known as Amatsu Mikubashi originally was portrayed as the Japanese god of evil, but in actuality, he was an offshoot of Oblivion, the cosmic entity embodying the void that existed before the universe began. Because of course he was. An incarnation of the primordial darkness and chaos that existed before the universe, the Chaos King exists as a dark counterpart to the cosmic being Eternity. That by itself makes Amatsu an incredibly powerful being on a cosmic level. In a mission to bring everything to chaos, he started waging war on all the gods of every pantheon in the universe, and he actually did defeat and take control of almost all of them. It took a combined effort of heroes plus Hercules, who was amped up to incredibly insane godlike levels, to take him down in the Chaos War storyline. Absolutely check it out if you haven't already, it's fantastic.
Number 3, Mephisto. If you're not a big comics fan, maybe you recognize the name Mephisto from countless Reddit threads and headlines saying he'd be appearing in the next episode of WandaVision somewhere. Remember how convinced we all were? Simpler days. So just who is Mephisto actually? Well, basically for all intents and purposes, he's the Marvel Comics version of Satan. Where things get incredibly confusing is that he's not actually Satan, because that's a separate character in the Marvel Universe, but he's his own evil, powerful entity, and boy is he that. Mephisto is a long-standing evil responsible for a lot of some of the biggest suffering in the Marvel Universe. He captured Doctor Doom's mother's soul, he bonded Johnny Blaze to the Ghost Rider, and those are just some of his lesser feats. Mephisto is capable of full-scale reality alteration, like when he infamously changed the entire Marvel timeline to erase Peter and Mary Jane's marriage in exchange for healing Aunt May. Also, he could nip a timeline in the bud where he was defeated by Spider-Man's daughter. You gotta respect that level of pettiness. He hasn't shown up in the MCU yet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's coming soon. Just give it some time. One more day, maybe.
And in at number 2 is Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, Lord of Oblivion, and Master of the Raging Storm, is an immensely powerful extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. He was worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos. As the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. To do this from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other deities like himself, himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, like Kane Marco and the other avatars. Now, if you pay close attention to the magic wielders in the Marvel Universe, particularly Doctor Strange, you will hear them invoking Cyttorak's name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak. He doesn't really show up a lot in the pages of Marvel Comics, but when he does, it's always as this super imposing, terrible force.
And finally, coming in at the #1 spot, well, it only made sense to have this below everyone else, the one below all. Yeah. Kinda hard to top that. The one below all is the dark side of the one above all, the highest form of creation in the Marvel Multiverse. If the one above all is the embodiment of all the compassion and love that exists out there, well then the one below is the opposite of that and the beautiful embodiment of all the hatred and rage that's inside us all. It's a bit of an eldritch creature, existing in the lowest points of reality, you know, below all, quite literally, it's in the name. It's responsible for all the gamma radiation in the world, as this is how it manifests itself throughout the multiverse. All of Hulk's rage and anger stems from drops of hatred of the one below all, just a tiny fraction of what it could be capable of. The one below all has existed before the multiverse, the universe itself even, and is thought to ultimately be the harbinger of all evil that's ever manifested in the Marvel Universe. Considering how much darkness, how much hate, how much evil exists out there, that's gotta count for something. Mephisto was unable to thwart the one below all, saying it was more powerful than he was. Bruce Banner theorized that no, God of the Symbiotes was just another avatar of the one below all, meaning when it comes to ultimate evil, it's kinda hard to top something below it all.
And at 10, Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Send Me to the ER. Oh man. And at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right. But what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just, yeah. That's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man. And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting. And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker, who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman, among others, obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver.
At number 5, we have Superman from the House of L Future State storyline. This version of the hero has the exact same backstory that we're used to, being the last son of Krypton, all that jazz. But in this continuation, Superman is captured and has his powers stripped after being stabbed with kryptonite. He's then trapped by Mongol in one of his war worlds and forced to fight in a gladiatorial arena. Every time he dies, Mongol brings him back to life and forces him to fight again. Meanwhile, in the 30th century, a group of Superman's descendants create a new version of the House of El and rule over the cosmos, believing Superman has always been nothing but a myth. It's sort of a sad story in reality, but don't worry, Superman does make a comeback in the end after his time as a gladiator. At number 4, we have the Superman from Superman vs. Terminator. This one is pretty self-explanatory, and it's not considered to be an official part of the DC canon as you can imagine. But it's still one of the cooler iterations of Superman, all things considered. Created by Alan Grant and Steve Pugh over at Dark Horse Comics, Superman vs. the Terminator, Death to the Future, is just a fun read. When Skynet sends Terminators to find a young man named Connor in Metropolis, they're met with resistance they don't quite expect when none other than Superman shows up. The art style and storytelling matches up pretty darn well with the DC Comics if you ask me, and I just felt like this version of the hero needed some love due to how unique his circumstances are. At number 3, we have 6th Dimension Superman. Living in what appears to be a more advanced future, we're introduced to an older Justice League that's initially thought to be the Prime Earth Justice League, which seems plausible at first due to the way that they're dressed among a few other things, but eventually we realize that it's just a futuristic version of the current Justice League. And with the team still being led by Superman, we assume that they've been continuing on with their typical crime-fighting business. But there's another twist that's soon revealed, which is that Superman is actually World Forger masquerading as the Kryptonian. The real future Superman's whereabouts are unknown at the time, but World Forger looks and acts just like the real Superman, so I felt that he belonged on the list. Okay, fine, I mainly included him because of his cool costume design, but even in his short 10-issue run during Justice League Volume 4, he appears to be about as powerful as an aging, more wise, and practiced Superman might be. At number 2, we have Justice Lord Superman from Justice League Beyond. In this alternate future, Lex Luthor is President of the United States, and Superman is, at first, pretty much the same as the one we know. But when President Luthor executes the Flash, Superman storms the White House and confronts him. But after Luthor delivers this manipulative speech saying Superman has helped him become evil and is a big important counterpart to all his evil deeds, Superman is pushed over the edge and executes the president. This comes as a shock to Superman's allies, but it sets a new precedent for this futuristic team known as the Justice Lords. And moving forward, Justice Lord Superman continues to deal with criminals by lobotomizing them with his laser vision. This storyline actually feels like a combination between Injustice and The Dark Knight Rises, in that there's a morally questionable team being led by a twisted version of Superman, and then Batman decides he needs to stand up against Superman's destructive ways, except in this case, it all happens sometime in the distant future, fitting it nicely at the top of this list. At number 1, we have John Kent from Future State. This is a fun one. A younger version of the hero who is the offspring of Superman and Lois Lane. The Future State event was released in 2021 and looked at what a potential future for the DC universe would and could look like. And alongside a handful of other new characters taking on the mantles of notable DC heroes, John Kent takes on the Superman mantle. There isn't much known about him quite yet, but at first glance he appears to have a more personal disposition. Possibly his half-human heritage gives him a bit more of an approachable energy, almost like Invincible. I'm looking forward to seeing how far John Kent goes in the comics and how they will develop a canonized story of how he ends up taking over for his father in the long run.